We have a session now with myself and Peter Bennett, OBE. I'm going to introduce Peter because everyone else has been introduced and Peter hasn't. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do know Peter. But Peter is the Managing Director of PASMA, the trade association representing, as you know, the mobile access tower industry, and he's the Executive Director of the Ladder Association. He's Chair of the Access Industry Forum, who have put on the event today, the forum for all 11 leading trade associations and federations in the UK work at height sector. And also chair of the No Falls Foundation. We're going to hear more about that later, in the UK registered charity dedicated to reducing falls from height through, crucially, research and education. And just over the next sort of 20-25 minutes or so, Peter and I'm going to ask Peter some questions around this document, which has been mentioned a few times already this morning, the all-party parliamentary group document on work at height, the inquiry report. As mentioned earlier on this morning, Alison Thewlis MP can't be here, of course, for PERDA rules. She's not allowed to talk at such events in case it's deemed to be campaigning, who was very instrumental, of course, in helping this through and sort of pulling together the very important work that Peter's going to talk about. So the format we're going to use is I'm going to ask Peter some questions. We're going to discuss some of this. It's a very important document, and I think there's some real interesting nuances about where it came from, how we arrived at this point, and crucially what it's designed for, just to give you a good update. You can access this document as well. It is online, so you can download it, and I do recommend you do. It's full of excellent information about the whole work at height sector, the legislative framework and everything else. So it's a really important read, I think, for everybody in the room. So Peter, I suppose my first question is how did this all come about? What was the driver behind this document?
Okay. I should just make a slight correction. It's Alison Thewlis, Parliamentary candidate. She's no longer an MP.
Yes, of course, yes.
Yes.
Sorry, it's very hard to keep up to date on what's going on in government right now.
This all came about when, in Access Industry Forum, we were discussing the fact that as leading industry bodies in the work at height sector, we had all been doing so much to try and make a difference to the number of falls from height. Yet, you wake up one day, and I've been in this industry now 40 years. 40 years later, we realise that 40 years has passed, and still falls from height is one of the top causes of fatalities and serious injuries. And then we ask ourselves, why is that? And when we ask ourselves, why is that, we then are led to the next question, which is, but what are all these falls from height? How do they happen? What kind of equipment's been being used? What are the circumstances of it? What is the problem and how big is the problem? And we've been asked these questions lots of times as well. The Lofsted Review came along and we contributed to the Lofsted Review. We lobbied quite strongly and quite hard to ensure that there was no return to what was affectionately known as the 2-metre rule. And then the Lofsted Review made some recommendations, and those recommendations related to a couple of things, one of which was RIDOR and the need to review RIDOR. So speaking to my colleagues at the Access Industry Forum, we had said, well, this is an opportunity for us to make a change to RIDOR, so that we can ask the appropriate questions that will give us the kind of answers that we're looking for. We had as a principle behind that we were entitled to ask for that. And we were entitled to ask for that purely from the point of view that falls from height is top of the list for fatalities and very high up on the list for serious injuries. And since we're concerned about it, and since everybody else is concerned about it, it makes sense that we should know and understand the extent of the problem. However, I'm sorry to tell you that despite my best endeavours and my most logical argument, it was clear to me that the policy lead who was undertaking the review was essentially telling me, no can do. The guiding principle that the policy leader is working on is I cannot put, and I will not be allowed to put, additional burden on industry. And whether you say that's an additional burden or not, the fact of the matter is I have one job to do here, and that's to change the reporting regime from 3 days to 7 days. That was a bit of a disappointment, particularly because, as I say to you, from our point of view, we thought it would make a very clear, very logical, very sensible argument. However, we also appreciate that members of the Health and Safety Executive are civil servants and they have to do what the government tells them. So we then come back from that and we say, right, okay, if we cannot do it that way, then how about if we approach the Health and Safety Executive and say, listen, industry would be prepared to pay, to fund an inspector embedded in Bootle or wherever these reports are coming into, to undertake this interrogation, to gather the information that will point us in the right direction. That was ostensibly received favourably. There needed to be some checks done. There were some checks done. Went to the head of the policy head. They went to the legal eagles. The legal eagles said it's unusual, I've never come across it before, but apparently we could do it. But you know how when you're kind of 2 years, 3 years down the road and nothing's happened, you kind of get the impression this can is being kicked down the road. That's when we got to the point of saying, listen, it's a difficult job. It's a difficult job as a civil servant, and we appreciate the situation. But what we need to do is we need to now go past the civil servants and we need to go to the politicians because we need to change policy. That's what kicked us off in the APPG route. Yeah.
So So I suppose I'm trying to think. Obviously, I remember the Lofsted review, and of course, a lot of the myth busting came off the back of that as well.
Yep.
And there was a huge challenge to health and safety in terms of people feeling it was this, the words that we used often were unnecessary burden.
Mm-hmm.
So for those people out there that would say something like, haven't we gone far enough, or have we gone as far as we can go, rather, in worker hire, what would you say to them? I mean, because it's something I do hear, surely we're doing as much as we can do. Why are we doing this?
And I've heard the same thing. And you do sometimes look at it, or sometimes people put it to you and you say, look, it's how it is. Falls from height are the biggest, have been, are now, and always will be the biggest cause of fatalities and serious injuries. And we could accept that and say that's just how things are. But I personally don't look at things like that. I look at things from the point of view of if I've got a problem, if there's something that's bothering me, I ask myself the question, can I do something about this? And if I can do something about it, if I can't do something about it, there is no sense in me worrying about it. I may as well just let it go. But if I come to the conclusion, I think we could do something about this, then my philosophy is, if you think you should do something about it, do something about it. And that is exactly where we are with this just now. I look at it in the last 5 years, and I quote these figures from the point of view of making a sort of longer term thing. In the last 5 years, there have been almost 200 fatalities. In the last 5 years, there have been something in the order of 30,000 non-fatal injuries. And unlike other types of causes of non-fatals, falls from height are more likely to result in life-changing injuries. There's not that many people get up from a fall from height. Don't misunderstand me, we do acknowledge and we know that the UK is comparatively ahead of others, but try telling that to the people who have had the fall from height and who have been affected by the ramifications of a fall from height.
Yeah, I always see, for me, safety is all about energy.
Yes.
So the more energy in a system, or the more energy that's available, I always feel that the more likelihood that people are going to get very seriously harmed, or if not killed. And I think gravity and hard surfaces don't go well together.
Correct.
And, yeah.
So just before we move on to the next one, I just need to make another point as well. Most of what we're talking about, and most of our discussions here, are related to fatalities, injuries, reporting injuries in the workplace. We ain't even got to the number of fatalities and serious injuries from falls from height and working at height in the domestic environment. I don't know, I haven't got a clue what the numbers are. However, what I can tell you is that my colleague in Rospa, Errol, told me in a discussion that from the research that they had done previously using the HAS and the last data which is gathered at accident emergency units in the hospitals, they estimate that you can multiply these workplace figures by a factor of 40. Just think of that. I mean, you're talking about some really big numbers here. Sorry.
No, that's really important. I mean, I certainly see this as a sort of holistic thing. I mean, we often kind of segment work off from everything else, but actually, you know, people at work have home lives as well, and vice versa. So I think a holistic approach. And the statistics actually that are in the APPG are really quite startling, and they do a very good comparison with other injuries which may result in fatality, struck by moving vehicle, moving object, and so on. And work at height is right up there, you know, of course. It's one of the biggest causes. So if there was ever a good reason to do anything, it's that. But I think it's more profound than that as well. I think it's the fact that, as Peter's just saying, that actually, you know, we haven't gone far enough. We can go a bit further, and we can actually prevent these entirely. And why shouldn't we? So one of the interesting things you said earlier was about RIDDOR, and I wanted to ask you a question about one of the key recommendations that's in the report. And there are a number of recommendations. One of the key ones that really struck me was enhanced reporting. Yep. So what does that mean? What did you mean by enhanced reporting?
Okay, what do you mean by that? For those of you who are not familiar with it, currently reports of incidents are reported to the HSE using free text. So free text, if I may be so impolite, means you tell a wee story. Okay, so you tell that story, and you'll tell your story your way, and you'll tell your story your way, and you'll refer to something as this, and you'll refer to something as that. And it makes it very, very difficult to try and draw from that comparisons to say, this was an apple, and that's an apple. We do appreciate that what the HSE are doing in respect of their use of algorithms and juxtaposing words and trying to get it to make sense and be able to produce these very nice pictograms and graphs and all the rest of it. However, without wishing to appear impolite to them and not taking anything away from that good work, because it's better than what we had before, nevertheless, I still go back to the same point, and that is, would it not be easier if we asked the right questions in the first place? If we ask the right questions that will give us the answers, that's going to make life an awful lot easier, and it's going to make it easier for us as an industry to know where we need to apply resource and where we need to apply effort. And if we go in the other direction, which is the direction we want to go in, and make it so that you, when it is a fall from height, you're streamed in another direction, and we ask you specific questions. Now, we proposed, I think there's only about 7 questions, and from those 7 questions, we would be able to work out what type of work at height equipment was it, what type of work at height method were you using, was the fall from height as a result of there not being a guardrail there, there being an inadequate guardrail there, and essentially it's a drop-down menu. Although we do allow, or we have suggested that there should be a provision for an other, there might be others. And we ask an important question as well, because again, I think it was Paul Reeve who asked me, we're first looking at working at height in the Cognac work at height group. Do we not have any statistics on this? How many people have been trained? No, we don't. We do not have any statistics on the people who fall from height, who are killed, who are injured. We don't have anything that tells us were any of them trained. It would be good for us to know that. It would be good for us to know a lot of things about it, and certainly more than we currently do. We contend that it will be no additional burden. In fact, if you consider it, if you have to compose your story, and if you have to tell what happened in your own words, that's more difficult than if we say it can only be one of these 10. Take your pick. The answer can only be one of these 6. Take your pick. And essentially what it does is it makes it easier, but it also makes it easier at the output end for us to do comparisons from one year to the next, because we're able to say specifically it was a tower, it was a ladder, it was a moop, or whatever it might be.
So one of the things as well that is sort of in there, and it's something in the industry we know is really important, is this idea of near-miss reporting.
Yep.
Now, of course, we know that the HSE, you know, sort of wants certain things reported at a certain level, but there's a lot of stuff they're not interested in. Something that I know we discussed as well was this sort of confidential near-miss reporting. So that really interested me. Can you sort of expand on that, what your vision is for that?
Well, it kind of relates to what you said previously. From the industry point of view, we are trying to look at working at height holistically. It's a very trendy word. I don't really like using trendy words. So we're trying to look at it three-dimensionally. And if we look at it three-dimensionally, we need to consider, as most sensible, safety-thinking organisations do, wouldn't it be better if we could intervene before the accident happens? And as we know, and as all you safety professionals will know, most definitely, before you have the injury or the serious injury or the fatalities, there is a whole bundle of near misses. At this moment, there's no way for those near misses to be reported, and so we would like to appoint an organisation to gather that information. Now, it might be difficult, and it's certainly something that's not been tried before. It's certainly not in such a wide industry sector. But even if we had under-reporting on that, which we would expect, it would still give us useful data and big data that would tell us where we need to direct attention, where we need to direct resource, and do it before it results in a fatality or an accident.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, as a sort of academic, I suppose I'm really interested in bigger bits of data because it just allows us to make better decisions. You know more about what's going on, and I think with near missing, it's always underreported, but actually some reporting is better than no reporting.
Right.
And I think it's a really innovative concept. I mean, we all know about near miss reporting, but actually very few industries gather it in such massive amounts. So that would be quite innovative, I think, and would probably give us a lot more knowledge to be able to base our interventions on.
And I think the other thing, Paul, is there are other examples of it. There are other examples of it in aviation, in maritime, and construction design. There are other models that we can follow. And if it can be done in these sectors, why should we not be doing it in our sector, particularly since working at height?
And that confidential nature of it is quite important, isn't it? Because we know with reporting that people are often reluctant to report if they can in any way be associated with what's gone on, particularly if they feel responsible for it.
Indeed.
But I mean, obviously, I think what we need to do is look at maybe cultural change.
Absolutely.
Which is another thing in your report, which I did want to pick up on about. It does allude to cultural change. We've heard quite a lot about it this morning. So it would be interesting to sort of get your take on that and what you see as fundamental cultural change in terms of the recommendations.
Again, I think on this, although there may have been some research done on it, I am not aware of any specific research into why people do the things that they do that cause falls from height. And we will hear later from the No Falls Foundation, which has as one of its primary objectives the commissioning of research of that nature for that very purpose. But I mean, we can probably have an educated guess at some of it. And I suppose from the APPG report's point of view, we have looked to try and bring in a few interventions and to have those interventions in such a way that they can make a difference. So I know we had the conversation last night where...
Yeah, we had a very good conversation last night about a great concept which I really loved, which was the idea that no fear sort of equates to no risk.
Correct.
And actually, and this is an insight from Peter actually, that people sometimes with no fear don't realise the risk they're under, and therefore it can make them more reckless perhaps, and then they can walk off the edge, so to speak, or not appreciate the need for a control, which is interesting.
I think, as you say, I've spoken to quite a few work at height organisations. I've been asked to go and talk to them about what's this APPG about, and one of the things I have said to them is, look, there are 10 million people, there's 1 million businesses working at height every year, and all the time you're working at height, you're at risk of fall, right? Unless you do something to prevent that from falling. And who are the most at risk? The people who do it all day, every day, right? Because they're exposing themselves to the risk for longer. And as Sean has alluded to there, my experience is we have a natural inclination to avoid unprotected edges. It's built in. It goes back to primeval days where We knew as cavemen that if we go over that cliff, there is nobody who's going to look after our family, so we've got a natural inbuilt aversion to unprotected edges. But people who work at height regularly overcome that fear, and they not only overcome it, they become inured. It means nothing to them. It's as if they're working on the ground. And as Sean has alluded to there, that can lead them to a situation where they actually just don't even know. They become totally oblivious of the risk that they're at.
So in terms of the cultural change piece, really it's about education, isn't it? Really, I think that seems to come through quite strong. But it's broader than that, isn't it? It's more than just running a training course. It's more about changing an entire viewpoint about working at height, so people really accept it and accept the change is necessary. I think that's how I see it.
I think one of the other things that we covered last week was, we've been speaking about this in some of the other conferences that we've run, and there seem to have been plenty of them this last little while, and that is that we conduct training and we teach people, or we train people how to do things safely, and we tell them everything they need to know about towers and everything they need to know about ladders. And we can say with some confidence when they leave our training centres, they know what they should know. But they don't necessarily do what they know, right? And I have a theory that that's because they don't think anybody's watching, right? When they leave the centre, nobody's watching what they're doing. And again, I put it one step further. Even if there was a manager watching, would that manager actually know what was good and what was bad in any case, so they can get off with it? So that is an area that I think we need to be looking at and that we need to address.
Yes, and we had, I think we were a couple of beers in at this point last
yes.
night.
Alan
And, yes, and we started having quite an interesting conversation about technology.
Yes.
And the use of technology, which again is mentioned in the APPG document, and it's very interesting, the idea that we can innovate, we can use emerging technologies to make a difference in this area. And we talked about that idea that, you know, people do training, they go out, nobody's watching them. And then I was sort of saying, well, what if the equipment knew? What if the equipment knew whether it had been put up correctly? What if there was some sort of information provided at the time of use? I think Peter said, yes, that's entirely possible. You know, you could have, observations on people. You could have equipment that maybe reacts in a particular way. So technology is an interesting piece, isn't it? I mean, you'll know a bit more perhaps about what's realistic. I'm sort of thinking crazy ideas, you know, about talking scaffolding, but you never know.
I mean, I don't know if we're going to talk scaffolding just yet, but I am absolutely convinced that technology could make a big difference. It could make this step change in how we make working at height safe. And I don't mean like really fancy-dancy technology. I mean taking technology that is in this sector over here and saying, how can we make that work in this sector over here to make a difference? We know, and loads of people have spoken about drones, and is it still working, or is it broken? That's fine. Loads of people have spoken about drones, and I think drones are going to do good stuff for us as well, and they already are doing good stuff for us. We know about robotics, and we know about robotic window cleaning machines and all the rest of that, and that's all very good. And I do think that is an area where we could and should be working to develop it. And we as an industry, although we're probably turkeys voting for Christmas, but if we want to make a difference to folks at height, we should be talking to the technology giants and saying, there's an opportunity for you here. Yeah. There is an opportunity for you. If you could design something that would do that would avoid us having to send that precious person up there that might fall down and be killed, then you would make money.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there's a huge opportunity here for innovation, to do something interesting and different. You just need to get the people who are experts in that area to realise what the issue is and get them to innovate around things that we can't even possibly imagine. Indeed. So we're just about running out of time. I know Peter could talk about this all day. It's a fantastic document. I just wanted to ask you one last thing about what are the next steps? What's happening next? Okay. With this document, so if you can answer that question. I
will try my very best. so far, having produced the document, we have had a number of APPG meetings. We had a Westminster Hall debate. I don't know if you saw it. You can see it if you're interested. And we had a meeting with the Minister, which was very positive. We had an APPG meeting just the other week there, the other month there, which was looking specifically at the enhanced reporting elements of it. Our contention is, and we still say it, that if we can get better and objective data and evidence from actual incidents and through voluntary no blames, near misreporting, we can create a body of evidence. That body of evidence will allow us to direct our efforts and resource. If I'm being honest, and I don't really wish to be impolite to our colleagues at HSE, we got a bit of pushback from HSE in respect of our enhanced full reporting. Instead,
They've all gone, I think.
well, no, it's all right. Sarah's away. Joanne's here somewhere. I don't know where she is.
There's a few still here. Okay.
So we've got a bit of pushback. That does not mean to say we're going to give up. We're going to continue, and we're going to continue trying to push the case for this because we think it's important. Making better use of technology to effect these step changes, I think, is and how we can improve working at height is definitely on the agenda. We also want to begin the conversation, and I know this is a bit out there. Right? It's a bit out there because we've never considered it before. But relating back to what we said before by Sarah and by others, look, we need to get to a situation where unsafe working at height is as socially unacceptable as drinking and driving, smoking indoors. I can smoke outdoors, don't give me a hard time, okay? And driving about, speaking to your telephone, right? Those are becoming increasingly, some are further along the line than others. We want to get unsafe working at height to be that way. And if you look at how, as I frequently do, look at other sectors and say, how do they deal with it? And when you get to the very end, all the people that are going to be convinced have been convinced. You then get to the really difficult ones. And that's why we are saying in the APPG report, maybe we need to look at the civil enforcement. Maybe we need to look at, for you people who will not be told, who will not listen, who will not get the message, maybe the only thing you're going to listen to is if we say, it's going to cost you money. If we come past and you're working on a tower or a scaffold and you've not got a guardrail on, there should be a penalty applied to it. Be a bit out there, but we should start the conversation.
Peter, thank you very much. We've run out of time. I know we could probably talk a lot more about this. Please download the document and read it if you haven't done so. It's very good, some excellent information here. Regardless of how the document goes forward, it's extremely useful as a document of best practice, and download it. And for anyone who's contributed to this, thank you very much. Really good piece of work, actually.